And we are recording. So as you know, we're continuing our discussion of the development of the principles of Reform Judaism. And just as I was welcoming people a moment ago, it occurred to me, I don't know if the other main movements in Judaism have these kinds of statements of principles. I'm quite certain that Orthodoxy does not. I mean, there's lots of material about what traditional Jews do. You know, the Talmud is filled with it. The Shulchan Aruch is a book of Jewish law. So there's a tremendous amount of material. And of course, different subsets of Orthodoxy address observance in different ways. The Ashkenazim and the Sephardim are different. I'm not actually aware, there could be, but I'm not aware of anything like this in the conservative world. But we certainly have this series of articles adopted by the Central Conference of American Rabbis as Reform Judaism developed. Alan, were you going to add something?
Well, I think someplace in the, if I'm right at the timing, the late 19th century, 25 years after the Reform movement sort of it created its formal organization, the conservative movement did do a comparable thing in reaction. I've heard different stories, but I'll give the one that I like. In reaction to the fact that the Reform movement went too far, they modernized Judaism in a way that we've been discussing, and yet the conservative movement saw a need for modernizing, and that caused the birth of. So that must have been in the form of a committee or platform or.
Yeah, I'm expressing my ignorance. I really don't know if there's such a thing. Yeah,
I'm sorry. Just the connection. The only other piece we know is the responsa. So they still have a way to adapt to modernity through responsa, like the Reform movement does also.
Yes, and and responsa, which are basically formal questions submitted to authorities, and responsa go back, to ancient times. I don't know how old the earliest ones are, but I'm pretty sure I remember that Maimonides and Rashi all issued responsa, and in the Orthodox world, or traditional Jewish world, the responsa basically were questions submitted to an authority. So there wasn't a committee per se, but there would be very well respected authorities like Rashi or Maimonides, and people would ask questions, and they would issue rulings and explanations. In the Reform world, there is something called the Responsa Committee of the CCAR, which I think goes back to the 1930s. And in the conservative world, there's something called the Jewish Law Committee, and I don't know what its history is. Yeah, Erwin, you were going to say something.
Yes, I would like to ask you. My understanding is when the Rebbe Rabbi Schneersens became the head of the movement, he was the first one who sent out young rabbis all over the world to establish a shul or followers for the Hasidic movement. And I don't know if, because I don't know that much about it, that he does not have some kind of a committee which established all that.
Yeah, I think you're right. And it's just a reflection in the Orthodox world. It's respected leaders that make decisions. And I don't know, and certainly in the Hasidic world, it would be the Rebbe. So each Hasidic movement, so you have Chabad is one of them, Satmar is another one. There's about 20 or more.
Chabad hasn't had a Rebbe in like 30 years or so.
I'm sorry?
Chabad hasn't had a
Chabad does not have a Rebbe. So I think they have a number of people who take responsibility for running the movement. But Schneerson doesn't have a successor at the moment, and I think it's an interesting issue for Chabad. The other Hasidic movements typically have, leaders, and yeah, there's an individual making rulings, and the ruling would only apply to that different group. And in a way, this reminds me, I don't know if this is actually true, but it reminds me of, in Christianity, I wish I had some of my Christian scholars present. In Christianity, what you have in the New Testament are the letters of Paul, who's writing to different Christian groups in the early days of Christianity, and basically setting up Christian theology in the very early days. And then what you then have are, certainly this is true in Christianity, you have councils. So you have the Council of Nicaea, and you have a bunch of other councils that literally lay down the rules of what you must believe in. And of course, in the Catholic world, you have, the Vatican and the Pope. And so legal authority is very different in different elements of religion. So that's, by way of introduction, what we're doing now is, I'm going to put up on the screen, actually, two things. Yes. So this is kind of the master document, which is platforms adopted by the CCAR. So we've read a bunch of these. We read the Pittsburgh platform of 1885, the Columbus platform of 1937, the Centenary Perspective of 1976, 100 years after the founding of these groups, CCAR and HUC. And now the one we're going to read tonight is the Miami platform, which is really focused on Zionism. And then the last one we'll read next week would be from Pittsburgh in 1999. Okay, so I presume you can see the Reform Judaism and Zionism centenary. Okay, good. I'm never quite sure.
I noticed that there's one of these called the Centenary Platform a lot more than once every 100 years. Did they do them on in years that were at the 100th anniversary of something, or did they simply, whenever they wanted to do one, they looked and saw what happened 100 years earlier?
So I wondered about that too. So the Centenary Perspective in San Francisco is 1976. It's the 100th anniversary of the founding of, I think, both the CCAR and Hebrew Union College. The 1997 is 100 years, I think, after the first Zionist Congress.
That's right.
Or a major Zionist Congress.
Is that really? I mean, it is the 100th year, but I never. You're going to hear that connection in what we're.
Yes, absolutely.
So then,
so that's why, I agree with you, Stephen. They seem to be calling everything a centenary perspective, although it's only two things. But yeah, the reason this one is called a centenary platform is it's basically responding to Zionism, and what we're going to see in the introduction a discussion of the the history of Reform Judaism and Zionism, which as we will see went from the Reform Judaism is not Zionist at all, to this statement being a firm commitment of Reform Judaism to Zionism. So would someone like to read? I know, Joanne, you always volunteer.
I always first ask if anybody else wants to, and then I take.
Anybody else want to jump in, or you?
Otherwise,
I'll do it for a little bit.
Okay, so we'll let Alan read the first part, and then Joanne, I'll call upon you.
Okay.
To continue. Thank you.
Accepted by the Central Conference of American Rabbis, June 24, 1997, Miami, Florida, preamble. In recognition of the centenary of the First World Zionist Congress, August 29, 1897, the Central Congress of American Rabbis hereby issues its first platform dedicated exclusively to the relationship between Reform Judaism and Zionism.
Yeah, and I'll interrupt you for a second, just to remind you that you had basically Herzl, a not a religious Jew, a a newsman, gets very active and motivated on the subject of Jews ought to have our own state. And this movement grows. And so what you have is a series of World Zionist Congresses. And they get together. I don't remember how many of them there were, but definitely goes on.
Every 5 years, and one is coming up in 2025.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the governance there actually was a predecessor of how Israel is governed in terms of political parties and things. So it has had a tremendous, importance and influence, and it addressed questions like, what should the language of this new Jewish state be? And there were, arguments that it should be Yiddish. There were arguments that it should be Russian. There were arguments that it should be German. And of course, the argument that won was that it should be Hebrew. There were issues about what the flag should be. And, we can see it behind Alan there. And the idea was that they consciously imitated the talit for the flag of Israel, of course, with the Star of David in between. So this is 100 years later, Reform Judaism addressing the moment. Why don't you continue, Alan?
Before I continue, I'll just make this related comment. So some of us are involved in getting ready for the World Zionist elections, which will happen in 2025, which gives an opportunity for Jews worldwide to actually vote on things that spend money on behalf of Zionism in Israel, from the viewpoints of liberal to traditional different approaches. So since I never knew this in here, I'm going to make sure the people building this marketing program know about this part, because they probably do, but it's very good. Okay, in 1885, the framers of the Pittsburgh Platform of Reform Judaism declared that they no longer expected Jews to return to a national homeland in Palestine. The platform's authors proclaimed we should consider ourselves no longer a nation, but a religious community, and therefore expect neither a return to Palestine nor a restoration of any of the laws concerning the Jewish state. That was 1885. Okay. By 1937, the CCAR had reversed its stand on Jewish peoplehood and declared in its Columbus platform that Judaism is the soul of which Israel, the people, is the body. The document further states, we affirm the obligation of all Jewry to aid in its, meaning Palestine's, upbuilding as a Jewish homeland by endeavoring to make it not only a haven of refuge for the oppressed, but also a center of Jewish culture and spiritual life. This affirmation of Jewish peoplehood was accompanied by a reaffirmation of Reform Judaism's universal message. We regard it as our historic task to cooperate with all men, let's call it people, in the establishment in the another needed word other than kingdom, but kingdom.
Yeah, we don't have to update the gender.
All right.
Of this, we're actually reading a historical document. So
kingdom.
If you're angry at it, pound the table and get over it.
I'm not angry. I'm just trying to moderate. Okay, don't update. I get it. Okay. And here it comes again: universal brotherhood, justice, truth, and peace on earth. This is our messianic goal. Keep going. Okay.
Yeah, the CCAR.
The CCAR returned again to the question of Zionism in 1976, asserting in its centenary perspective, we are bound to the newly reborn state of Israel by innumerable religious and ethnic ties. We have both a stake in the responsibility in building the state of Israel, assuring its security, and defining its Jewish character. The centenary perspective also affirms the legitimacy of the diaspora and the historic universalism of Reform Judaism. The state, quote, the state of Israel and the diaspora in fruitful dialogue can show how a people transcends nationalism, even as it affirms it, thereby setting an example for humanity, which remains largely concerned with dangerously parochial goals. Sorry, can't not but laugh. That's not a gender thing. I sorry. Here again, the CCAR embraced Zionism as a meaning of fulfilling its universal vision and its opposition to narrow nationalism. Can I ask a question?
Sure.
In that the last paragraph, this reference, which I laughed at, was that a slam on orthodoxy?
I would say it's a slam on narrow nationalism, but it is affirming the idea that while we are recognizing that we are part of the Jewish people and a nation, that our interests are broader than that. I would say, in many ways, Orthodox Judaism sees itself as a nation and is not terribly concerned with interacting with the other nations of the world. And of course, different Orthodox movements are going to treat it differently. And I always remember a statement, and I can't remember now whether it's Soloveitchik or another Orthodox legal authority, who basically said we Jews, and he's talking about Orthodoxy, can indeed work with non-Jews on kind of community projects, and we're doing it for the sake of peace among peoples. But we are forbidden to talk with non-Jews about religious subjects. So there's certainly a sense of narrow nationalism in treating Judaism as a people, and certainly at the heart of Reform Judaism is both the idea that we are with these perspectives, although we are once again affirming the idea that we're a nation, and that idea was rejected in the early Reform Judaism. We are accepting that idea that we are a nation, but we are not abandoning the idea that Reform Judaism has a universal message. So I would say it's slamming both orthodoxy and nationalism, which of course led to World War II.
So the part about the forbidden to have religious conversations strikes me as I'm going to say fear, but a reason that also exists with some of the more extreme, like the Haredi, who don't want to interact because of the fear of assimilation.
Yes, I think that's true. Also, in some ways, I would say from an Orthodox perspective, it's beside the point. The point of Judaism is to get Jews to do mitzvot, and so that the universe will be repaired, and the Messiah will come, and it'll be the end of history. Why in the world would we want to talk to other people?
Which is admirable of how Chabad goes about orthodoxy, right?
I would say, and and I'd be interested to people who have more experience with Chabad than I do, but my sense is that Chabad is certainly open to things like drug programs and others, but I don't think Chabad addresses interfaith dialogue.
No,
I don't think Chabad is engaged in that at all.
Of course.
And I think Chabad is very open, but I think Chabad's really underlying goal is to get Jews to be more observant.
I was picking up on something, that was that's why I did that. But you're right in clarifying that. Is this a good time to hand off to the next reader at a?
I think maybe. Whoops. Let me get one more paragraph.
Yeah. One more. Okay, sure.
A century after, I think.
A century after Theodor Herzl called for the creation of a modern Jewish state, and nearly 50 years after the state of Israel joined the family of modern nations, the fundamental issues addressed in the previous CCAR pronouncements continue to challenge us, making this a fitting time to re-examine and redefine the ideological and spiritual bonds that connect Am Yisrael, the people of Israel, to Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, and to Medinat Israel. That's new to me. I don't know that word.
Oh, the word, yeah.
Medinat.
Yeah, Medinat Yisrael means the state of Israel, the political state of Israel.
I didn't. Okay. The CCAR affirms through this platform those principles which will guide Reform Judaism into the 21st century.
Yes. So, Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, is timeless. Am Yisrael, depending on how you count it, maybe 3,000 or 4,000 years old. Medinat Yisrael is 76 years old. Okay, so Joanne, would you like to jump?
Rabbi,
Yes.
may I ask you, isn't that the benefit of all diaspora Jews, could be American, Canadian, doesn't matter, that the state of Israel exists and free to to any kind of Jewish section, Hasidic, Reform, and all the other ones, which I don't remember right now.
Yeah. So what I would say is the state of Israel is a political entity, not a religious entity. So people often think about, and when you mention what you're mentioning, all Jews are welcome to become automatically citizens of Israel under the law of return. Law of return is a political law. It is not a religious law. And the reason it becomes clear is anyone with a Jewish grandfather, whether it's on the father's side or the mother's side, is eligible under the current law of return to become an automatic citizen of Israel. Anyone who is married to a Jew or is the child of a Jew is eligible for automatic Jewish citizenship. Now, many of that list would not be considered Jews under Orthodoxy. I mean, the clearest thing is if your grandfather on your father's side is Jewish, you are not Jewish at all under Jewish law, but you are eligible for automatic citizenship under Israel's law of return. Anyone who is converted in any community which recognizes the conversion, namely Reform Jews converted, in Camarillo, are eligible for automatic citizenship under the law of return. They are certainly not recognized as Jewish by the Orthodox authorities in Israel.
No, but my concern is, no matter how you look at the state of Israel and what political beliefs are in the state of Israel, I think it would be a different outlook if the state of Israel would not exist.
Yes, I mean, I think many people, including me, see Israel as a refuge should things get really bad. If the state of Israel had existed when Hitler came to power, the Jews could have left when Hitler was still allowing Jews to leave and go to Israel. On the other hand, you have certain ultra-Orthodox, such as the Satmar Hasids, who every year on Jewish New Year, not Jewish New Year, but Independence Day, burn the Israeli flag and argue that the state of Israel should not exist because only the Messiah can bring about a Jewish state. So
that's a very, very small fraction.
Yes, it's small. I wouldn't say it's very, very small. It's small but significant. Anyway, let's go on. Stephen, go ahead.
Well, first, you said grandfather, and I'm pretty sure that's wrong, that it's grandparent of either gender. Obviously, the maternal grandmother...
Oh, yes. The reason you're absolutely right. The reason I said grandfather is because Judaism doesn't go through the father's line, but eligibility for citizenship does.
Right,
but you're absolutely right. If you have one Jewish grandparent, you are eligible for Israeli citizenship under the law of return.
Also, there's a weird exception that if you were born Jewish but converted to another religion,
yes,
even if you would be eligible had you not been born Jewish, you're not eligible.
I don't understand the last comment you made.
If you were born Jewish and converted to another religion, even if you fall into one of the categories that would be eligible if they had not been born Jewish.
Yeah, my understanding of the law of return is if you have rejected your Judaism, then you have lost your automatic ability to become an Israeli citizen. I think that's right. And there's some, debate about how that law might change. And, with the before October 7th, there was lots of issues going on legally in the state of Israel. And one was an Orthodox movement to narrow the law of return and make it, eligible only for people who are recognized as Jewish by Orthodox Judaism. And to my knowledge, nothing has happened on that front, but it is an issue. And again, it's important to keep in mind that there's political laws and then there's religious laws, and they are not the same. Okay, Joanne, would you like to continue?
Okay.
Or
Judaism, a religion and a people. The restoration of Am Yisrael to its ancestral homeland after nearly 2,000 years of statelessness and powerlessness represents an historic triumph of the Jewish people, providing a physical refuge, the possibility of religious and cultural renewal on its own soil, and the realization of God's promise to Abraham. To your offspring, I assign this land. From that distant moment until today, the intense love between Am Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael has not subsided. We believe that the eternal covenant established at Sinai ordained a unique religious purpose for Am Yisrael. Medinat Yisrael, the Jewish state, is therefore unlike all other states. Its obligation is to strive towards the attainment of the Jewish people's highest moral ideals, to be a mamlechet kohanim, a kingdom of priests, a goy kadosh, a holy people, and laor goyim, a light unto the nations.
Yeah, and I'll just remind you that the word goy in biblical Hebrew means nation. It doesn't necessarily refer to non-Jewish nations. As it develops in the Talmud, it becomes a euphemism for non-Jews.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
Is it just me who lost the text of the share screen? I'm only seeing a gallery of faces and Joanne, but I don't.
Okay, so
We see it.
can the rest of you see the text?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know. It's okay. I don't know. I want to.
Okay, so let's continue from degradation.
From degradation to sovereignty. During 2 millennia of dispersion and persecution, Am Yisrael never abandoned hope for the rebirth of a national home in Eretz Yisrael. The Shoah Holocaust intensified our resolve to affirm life and pursue the Zionist dream of a return to Eretz Yisrael. Even as we mourn for the loss of 1/3 of our people, we witness the miraculous rebirth of Medinat Yisrael, the Jewish people's supreme creation in our age. Centuries of Jewish persecution culminating in the Shoah demonstrated the risks of powerlessness. We therefore affirm Am Yisrael's reassertion of national sovereignty, but we urge that it be used to create the kind of society in which full civil, human, and religious rights exist for all its citizens. Ultimately, Medinat Yisrael will be judged not on its military might, but on its character. While we view Eretz Yisrael as sacred, the sanctity of Jewish life takes precedence over the sanctity of Jewish land.
Stephen, I don't know if your hand is up with another question.
Oh, I left it up earlier.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the last line is worthy of taking note. There's nothing higher, actually, than life. It's interesting to say Jewish life. With the battles of to reclaim the West Bank as part of Israel proper. Of course, there's lots of debate and craziness going on today. But I remember going back 20 and 30 years, the chief Sephardic rabbi of Israel, who of course is Orthodox. In the Sephardic world, there are no other movements. Basically argued that that the precedence of human life is more important than the precedence of land or the importance of land. And he argued that we shouldn't, I don't remember exactly how he stated it, I'm sure I'm not stating it precisely, we shouldn't push to reclaim this land of the West Bank, even though he would argue that it really is promised to us, but because it would result in so many deaths if we were to really try and reclaim that land, that very much along the lines of that last sentence, that a life takes precedence over land. I thought that was a remarkable.
What time frame was that? What time frame?
I don't remember exactly, but my guess is we were talking, about like the 1990s and early 2000s.
Can I vote for him to take over for Ben Gvir and we'll?
I think you can hope for that, but my guess is he has passed on. But it is an interesting, it's an important perspective. Okay, so item number 3, Joanne.
Our relationship to the state of Israel. Even as Medinat Yisrael serves uniquely as the spiritual and cultural focal point of world Jewry, Israeli and diaspora Jewry are interdependent, responsible for one another, and partners in the shaping of Jewish destiny. Each Kehillah, Jewish community, though autonomous and self-regulating, shares responsibility for the fate of Jews everywhere. By deepening the social, spiritual, and intellectual relationship among the Kehillot worldwide, we can revitalize Judaism both in Israel and the diaspora.
And of course, I think that the Reform community has, and it predates 1997, all rabbis, cantors, and education students going to Hebrew Union College spend the first year of our study in Israel. And I was there from 1998 to 1999.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Alan.
Sorry.
The Year in Israel program actually started 50 years. They started it's 53rd year, whatever the math would be, around in the early around 1970.
Okay.
The movement decided that was part of creating that part of your training was to spend a year in Israel, and it's been I'm going to round approximately 53rd year that this.
Yeah. Thank you. And the conservative movement, at least when I was in Israel, they had their 3rd year of study in Israel. For Reform movement, it's your 1st year of study, and they think the Reconstructionist College also had a year in Israel program.
Our obligations to Israel. To help promote the security of Medinat Yisrael and ensure the welfare of its citizens, we pledge continued political support and financial assistance. Recognizing that knowledge of Hebrew is indispensable both in the study of Judaism and in fostering solidarity between Israeli and diaspora Jews, we commit ourselves to intensifying Hebrew instruction in all Reform institutions. Hebrew, the language of our sacred texts and prayers, is a symbol of the revitalization of Am Yisrael. To enhance appreciation of Jewish peoplehood and promote a deeper understanding of Israel, we resolve to implement educational programs and religious practices that reflect and reinforce the bond between Reform Judaism and Zionism. To deepen awareness of Israel and strengthen Jewish identity, we call upon all Reform Jews, adults, and youths to study in and make regular visits to Israel. While affirming the authenticity and necessity of a creative and vibrant diaspora Jewry, we encourage Aliyah, immigration, to Israel in pursuance of the precept of Yeshuv Eretz Yisrael, settling in the land of Israel. While Jews can live Torah-centered lives in the diaspora, only in Medinat Yisrael do they bear the primary responsibility for the governance of society, and thus may realize the full potential of their individual and communal religious strivings. Confident that Reform Judaism's synthesis of tradition and modernity and its historic commitment to Tikkun Olam, repairing the world, can make a unique and positive contribution to the Jewish state. We resolve to intensify our efforts to inform and educate Israelis about the values of Reform Judaism. We call upon Reform Jews everywhere to dedicate their energies and resources to the strengthening of an indigenous progressive Judaism in Medinat Yisrael.
So it's a very powerful statement. And, when you view it in historical context, it is a complete reversal of the position of Reform Judaism on Israel. And, we have lots of programs the Reform movement does about, obviously, the rabbis, cantors, and educators spending time there, but also kids. There are programs to spend a semester in Israel. My youngest, Andrea, spent a semester in Israel, and there's lots and lots of programs for that.
Israel's obligations to the diaspora. Medinat Yisrael exists not only for the benefit of its citizens, but also to defend the physical security and spiritual integrity of the Jewish people. Realizing that Am Yisrael consists of a coalition of different, sometimes conflicting religious interpretations, the Jewish people will be best served when Medinat Yisrael is constituted as a pluralistic democratic society. Therefore, we seek a Jewish state in which no religious interpretation of Judaism takes legal precedence over another.
And of course, that's a battle that is still going on, and I would say has a long way to go. When I lived in Israel, basically Reform Judaism had almost no official role. And I'm underlining the word official, in Jewish life in Israel, whereas Orthodox communities were supported by the state of Israel, and rabbis, chief rabbis of different towns were paid by the state of Israel. Reform synagogues had little or no support of the state by the state of Israel, which is a huge problem, because if you're an Israeli and you want to be a member of an Orthodox synagogue, there are basically no dues. You may want to contribute money, but there are no dues, because the salary of the rabbis and the upkeep of the building is paid for by the state. So reform synagogues in Israel then don't have that benefit, so they've got to raise a lot of money. And I would say that a lot of the support for synagogues in Israel and communities in Israel came from the United States. And I think things have gotten gradually better over the years, but there's still a ways to go. Ellen, you're very connected with that world.
Three things, and not in the right order, but what you just said is true, that the way in which money gets spent to the rabbis and to pay rent and staff is much more on a voluntary donation, and some of it is from America. But the Jewish Agency actually gives money to IMPJ, the Reform Movement in Israel, and they distribute it to the 54 synagogues.
Now, when you say the Jewish Agency, is that a government agency?
The Jewish Agency of Israel. It's a national institution. It's like KKL. I don't know how to describe what it is.
Like what? I'm sorry.
Oh, the JNF, the national institutions, of which the Jewish Agency, I think, is one of them. And
I'm not sure whether they are funded by taxes.
They're not funded by taxes. Okay.
Yeah, so there are charitable organizations in Israel and around the world which support liberal Judaism in Israel.
But the IMPJ, the World Zionist Organization, is one of those national institutions, and they raise money by selling land, and that money is part of this elections thing that we can talk about another time. But money, I'm going to say, so not zero money comes. Some money comes to the synagogues. The other two things I wanted to build on what you said about when you lived there is that in 2005, thanks to the lobbying of the Reform movement, and I'm going to say credit to Israel's democracy, the government agreed to pay salaries to 14 non-urban rabbis in different regional councils. And so 14, and maybe a little bit bigger, but not very many, are paid by the state government. And the second thing that also goes to the, I wanted to build on what you said, Rabbi, is the conversion law in 2021 also legitimized non-Orthodox conversion. So we have these little gestures which are
Right.
don't change the overall picture that you said that were not significant, but there have been some steps, and I wanted to say that. That's all.
Yes, and there's a huge issue is the Western Wall, and that's gone forward and back and up and down, and at the moment there is sort of an egalitarian prayer area, which is if you're facing the Western Wall, turn right and keep walking,
South.
and you're in an area where men and women can pray together, and Reform and conservative Jews can hold prayer services. I've held prayer services there, whereas it would not be permitted to to do so. Certainly not men and women praying together in the traditional Western Wall area. And in fact, you may know the story of the women of the Wall, and they will occasionally go and take a Torah scroll and be subject to a tremendous amount of harassment. So it is moving slowly. I absolutely agree with the way you characterized it.
Rabbi,
Yes.
I would like to, if I may, read something which comes from the I Center. I don't know, it's a Jewish group, and Rav Zevi writes the following thing here, and it's very interesting that Medinat Israel, the concept of separation of church and state, and issues of civil law and religious law, and so forth. It possessed the profound challenge of harmoniously being both a Jewish and modern state. And it also says that the state of Israel is rooted in a people of counsel, a political forum, men and women assuming responsibility for establishing and navigating the state. How does the new form authority inform Israel's path, and how does it correspond with the state of Israel vision of being a Jewish state?
Yeah, so I'm not familiar with the specific organization or issues, but broadly speaking, a major issue is, can Israel be both a Jewish state and a democracy? Can Israel be a Jewish state and truly guarantee the rights of non-Jews living in the state? And it's not an easy question, and it's not one that clearly is being addressed in this document. But it is a continuing issue. That recently there was a law change which emphasized the idea that Israel is a Jewish state, and I think it played down the requirement that street signs and documents have to be both in Hebrew and Arabic, whereas I think prior to that it was very much like Canada, where Canadian documents have to be both in English and French. And so there's political tension and real tension. I mean, one of the issues with the West Bank is, given growth rates and population growth in the Muslim world and in the Jewish world, if Israel was simply to take the West Bank Arabs and say, okay, we're making this land Israel, and you now are all citizens of Israel, and the same thing with Gaza, that the demographics, as I understand it, would say that at some point, and it's not that far in the future, maybe 30, 40, 50 years, there would be more Arab Muslims than Jews living in the land of Israel. And then you would have the question of whether Israel will continue to be a Jewish state or a democracy. So it's a real issue, but it's well, I think it's.
Rabbi, wasn't there some kind of a misunderstanding between the political leaders of Israel that the Israel is called Eretz Israel. It's not called the state for Jews.
Yeah, so the name of the political entity is not Eretz Yisrael, it's Medinat Yisrael, which means the state of Israel. A Medina is a state. Eretz
State of
Yisrael is
Israel.
the land of Israel. So I don't know that there's any misunderstanding involved there. But it's but it's not called Palestine. It's called Yisrael.
Yeah, but it doesn't call either the state for Jews.
No, it's called. It is not. It could have been called Judah, but it's not called Judah. It's called Israel. But it is clear. I think it's clear in the Declaration of Independence that it's a Jewish state, which guarantees the rights of non-Jews. But it is definitely, look, there's a Mogen David. There is a Star of Israel, Star of David on the flag. There's no question that Israel is a Jewish state. It grants automatic citizens to people who are Jews, not people who are Christians or Muslims, but people who are Jews. So there's no question
Are
about
other
it.
countries that grant automatic citizenship based on religion, or is Israel the only one that does that?
I think there are countries, I think like Germany, if you have German heritage, you can be automatically a citizen of Germany.
You need to be a genetic descendant. It can't be based on converting to a religion. And actually,
yes. I'm not aware of another political entity that is a state that automatically accepts as citizen someone who's converted to a religion. Now, somebody comes to the United States, if you convert to become an American, you adopt American beliefs, you swear allegiance to the Constitution, you take a test, you become an American citizen.
Even if I know for a fact that even if you are born in France and you leave the country when you are a young person, the French government calls you up when you are 18-year-olds and asks you if you want to become a French citizen.
Yeah, so I don't know anything.
So you will not automatically become a French citizen just because you are born there.
Right. In the United States, if you're born in the United States, you're automatically a U.S. citizen, and that's based on our Constitution. Alan.
Well, to Erwin's point, it's also the law in Israel that if a child who's not a child of an Israeli couple, both of whom are citizens, the child isn't automatically a citizen either. And so they have to apply to become citizens. The child that wouldn't be needed in the United States.
Yeah, so, and again, if the child is Jewish, I don't think there's an issue.
Well, not to be, but that's the, yeah, okay, I should.
So I don't know, and citizenship law is complicated. I mean, I have a granddaughter that's an adopted daughter of my son, who's an American citizen, and I'm working on getting her American citizenship, and it is not straightforward. So let's see if we can finish this article.
Okay.
Joy, redemption.
Redemption. We believe that the renewal and perpetuation of Jewish national life in Eretz Yisrael is a necessary condition for the realization of the physical and spiritual redemption of the Jewish people and of all humanity. While that day of redemption remains but a distant yearning, we express the fervent hope that Medinat Yisrael, living in peace with its neighbors, will hasten the redemption of Am Yisrael and the fulfillment of our messianic dream of universal peace under the sovereignty of God.
And I'll just observe, that's pretty messianic, that the renewal and perpetuation of Jewish life in Eretz Yisrael, in the first sentence, is necessary for redemption of the Jewish people and all humanity. That is very messianic. It actually surprises me. Let's press on.
The achievements of modern Zionism in the creation of the State of Israel, in reviving the Hebrew language, and absorbing millions of immigrants, in transforming desolate wastes into blooming forests and fields, in generating a thriving new economy and society are unparalleled triumph of the Jewish spirit. We stand firm in our love of Zion. We resolve to work for the day when waves of Jewish pride and confidence will infuse every Jewish heart in fulfillment of the promise. When God restores the fortunes of Zion, we shall be like dreamers. Our mouths will fill with laughter and our tongues with songs of joy. Then shall they say among the nations, God has done great things for them.
And there's the members of the tripartite Zionist Platform Committee, I guess CCAR representatives, HUCJIR representatives, and UAHC, what is now the URJ
What is
representatives, and a few others. Sorry, someone was asking something.
I said, what does tripartite mean?
Tripartite means there were three groups that
Ah.
were formed to write this report. This happens at CCAR meetings. Typically, there will be an important subject, and a committee will be assigned the job of preparing a document for approval by the full CCAR, and they will put a draft out, and it might be a year later or 2 years later that it finally comes up for a vote. And I have been at CCAR meetings where things like this come up for votes, and there's a lot of discussion and back and forth and amendments, and this is not this is the fact that it's a CCAR document means that it's more than just a committee document. It's prepared by a committee, but approved probably by a majority of the full CCAR. Yeah, Alan.
Yeah, they could use a different word, because you had to go back and tell us that the three parts are the three parts of the North American Reform Movement: the URJ, the HUC, and the CCAR. It's a movement committee. Is the tripart kind of makes it sound like it's unusual, but it's actually is the whole leadership of the entire movement.
Yeah. So the important point is, although it's a CCAR document and was accepted by the CCAR, the committee that created it had members of different groups. And my guess is many of these members, maybe not all of them, were also members of the CCAR. If they were rabbis and Reform rabbis, they were members of the CCAR, but some of them represented UAHC and some of them represented the college. I don't know that that it's terribly important, but that's true.
Rabbi,
yes.
I have a question for you.
Mhm.
Israel is the only country with the United States where both countries accept dual citizenship, even if the person is not Jewish. Let's say if I am an American and I go to Israel and I want to fight in an Israeli army, I can become a Jewish citizen and an American citizen.
Yeah, again, I'm not an expert on this, but I think there are many countries that have dual citizenship possibility.
That's right.
I'm sorry?
That's true.
Yes,
I have
it's
a
true.
friend. Canada and America would be an example. I know a number of people.
Yeah, and
Well,
Sonia doesn't push it, but she is also a citizen of Morocco, and because of service that her family did to Spain, I think she's also a citizen of Spain.
When they passed that law, did you have to do anything overtly?
No, I don't think she did a thing.
Okay.
So, and I don't know that she ever had to renounce. Actually, it'd be an interesting question. I'll have to ask her when she gets home. She became an American citizen. I don't know if she actually renounced her Moroccan citizenship, but I do know when we visit Morocco, she has her Moroccan citizenship card, residence card,
Yeah,
and she shows it to get into the country.
She gets a shorter line.
I have a dual citizenship with Canada, and for a long time I carried two passports.
Right.
And I have a Canadian Social Security. But the most interesting thing was when many years ago, I went to Hungary with my wife, God bless her, and the Hungarian government said that I am a Hungarian citizen because I was born there.
Okay.
So,
Yeah,
and I
again,
have to
every
go-
country has its own laws about citizenship.
I think the US law is if you want to become a citizen, you have to, through naturalization, you have to renounce any citizenships you already have. But whether the other country recognizes that, or they still consider you a US citizen, even though you've told the US that you're renouncing, it kind of varies.
My impression is that that was true at one time. I don't believe it's currently true, but I'm not certain.
I had to become an American citizen and not a dual citizen because UCLA demanded that I'm passing American certification to work in a medical school, and so I became an American citizenship to keep my position because it's
So without getting into a long discussion about citizenship laws of various countries, the thing I want to emphasize is in this statement, the reality that Jews are members of Am Yisrael. Whether we are, I am a member of Am Yisrael, the people Israel, and it is a nationality. I am not an Israeli citizen. I don't have an Israeli passport. If I wanted to, I could get one. But the thing I think many Jews don't understand, and I think very few non-Jews understand, is Judaism is not simply a religion, but it is also a nationality. And I know in my own interfaith work, that idea is often not well understood by non-Jews because it doesn't correspond to a similar idea. You know, the Catholic Church has its base in the Vatican in Rome, but it doesn't mean if you're a Catholic in Ireland, you're a citizen of the Vatican or a citizen of Rome. So my understanding is that Judaism is unique in that it is both a religion and a nationality. And so, you know, people will say, well, I'm not anti-Semitic, I'm anti-Zionist, but it's really not possible. You can be against the policies of the state of Israel, and you know, I was remarking, and I know I cut off the screen, but if I pop it up again, I think in the last one, you know, the phrase here is not "we stand firm in our love of Israel," or Eretz Yisrael, or Medinat Yisrael, or we stand firm in our love of Zion. I would say Zion is a statement that speaks of the fact that there is a nation, and the nation is the people Israel, and the word Zion has been used to you know to represent that. So you know, I think these days, in many ways, it is not politically correct to proudly declare that you're anti-Semitic, but many people will say, you know, we are not anti-Semitic, we're just anti-Zionist, which means
or
we're okay with Jews. We just don't think the Jews should have a state, and Jews having a state is a central element of Judaism.
How about people who are not opposed to Jews having a state, but they're opposed to Jews having a state in that particular place and are in favor of, let's say, this is sort of antiquated, but you'll know what I'm talking about, the Uganda plan from 100 years.
Yeah, I mean, yes. So that could have been an idea, you know, 100 years ago. Reasonable people could argue about whether the Jewish state needs to be in Eretz Yisrael. But now it's there. So it's like saying, I'm not against French people. I just don't think there ought to be a nation called France, or the nation called France ought to be in Uganda or something. Anyhow. So, Alan, I don't know if your hand is raised from before or you have something you wanted to add.
Not yet, unless I find something. I'm looking for something. I'll take it down.
Okay.
People who are in favor of a Jewish state in the pre-1967 borders, but not in the West Bank and Gaza.
What about that?
Would you consider them anti-Semitic?
No, I think that's a political issue.
Okay.
And, whether or not there'll be a two-state solution or a one-state solution is a political issue about which reasonable people can disagree and not be anti-Semitic. To say, from the state, from the ocean, from the river to the sea, Palestine must be free, is a statement that there should not be a Jewish state.
Rabbi,
Yes.
I am very confused, and I read many books about Ben Gurion.
Right.
Ben Gurion was a Zionist,
Yes.
and he didn't have too much to do with himself, with the religion.
Right.
So
He was a
why
secular
did
Zionist.
yeah, so a secular Zionist, correct. And why did he give so much authority to the religious movement?
Yeah,
If
he,
he
he
want,
gave it to them to get the support of religious Zionists.
yeah,
Because
but he knew
because
that he knew that in the long run it's gonna hurt the state of Israel.
I don't know that he knew that,
He did not know.
but in the state where he was organizing support for creation of a state, he needed support of all the Jews. And to get that level of support, it's a negotiation. He had to give up some things. And that's what happened.
And sometimes you can't base every decision on the long run. As if say,
If there's no short run, there's no long run.
I don't know if it's really from him. People don't eat in the long run; they eat every day. That you have to, you not surviving because doing what it. If you don't survive the day, then doing something that works in the long run.
Ben Gurion.
He was a visionary. He was the one who established kibbutz and kibbutzim, and he knew that where the state gonna be going.
Yes,
so
he was a visionary. He was a founder, but in order to achieve his goals, he had to surrender family law to religions. And the early Zionists were criticized for never facing the Arab problem. They really didn't worry so much about the Arab problem. They really focused on creating a state of Israel.
He after 1948, he really.
Well, you just muted yourself, Erwin. Erwin, you muted. Alan.
So since we're talking about citizenship in different countries, I wanted to read to you. I just obtained the 2-year visa that is now required as of January 2025. To travel to Israel, you need a separate visa. And in applying for that, I agreed to the following sentence. I said, I also hereby declare I have not acted against the Jewish people and the security of the state of Israel. I have not contracted any disease, et cetera, et cetera. So I am now bound by being a good Israeli.
Well, the interesting question from a legal point of view, you, in that document, are you promising not to do it in the future or stating that you haven't done it in the past?
Let's see, it just says there's no judicial arrest warrant against me and I'm not wanted by the police in any country. Your point is well made and not clarified. This was just a requirement to get a 2-year visa, which
otherwise, if you just go on a tourist visa, which I think is 90 days, you can't keep going back like you have done.
No, that's changing as of January. The 90-day thing will go away. I'm pretty sure. That's why I jumped ahead and got that. But your point is thinking ahead. I'm amused by, because you're right. It's not worded.
I'll just point out, when I visited China in 2008, to get a visa for China, I had to state that I'm not there for any religious proselytizing purpose, that I'm not there to preach any religion. I don't know if they still require that in China, but I absolutely had to make that statement, which for me, it's hard for me to wake up and speak in the morning without talking about religion. But anyway, that absolutely was a requirement to get the visa to visit China. And that was just a tourist visa. You know, I remember getting a visa to visit Jordan, and I don't remember making any particular promises to go into Jordan. Okay, any other thoughts?
I didn't need a visit when I was there in 2003.
You're talking about Israel.
No, I'm talking about China.
Okay, I mean, I don't know what the laws are, and you know, and I'm just telling you what I remember signing because I noticed that. I mean, there were a whole bunch of things you signed to apply for a visa to visit China. Now maybe the laws have changed. I was there in 2008. Don't know. I mean, one of the things about civil law is you have to read the laws and understand what the laws say. You can't necessarily use logic to predict what the laws will be. The laws are what they are.
And they could change.
Yes, I used to say about God's law and man's law that they both have good and bad elements. The good thing about God's laws, now I'm talking about physics and morality, is they are unchanging and they make sense. The bad news is if you don't like them, you can't change them. The bad thing about civil law, and now I was thinking about, you know, when I financed wind farms, they were tax shelters, and there were lots of laws about financing tax shelters.
So I can't
the-
change
the-
the law
the-
of gravity. Gravity.
The good news about the bad news about man's law is they are what they are. You have to read it, interpret it, and try and get around it, and so on. But the good news is if you don't like it, you can change it. You know, so laws change all the time.
Well,
But Rabbi, in my opinion, you should not change the law which is written in the Torah.
No, you can't change the law that's written in the Torah.
No,
Well, I
because
a lot-
you know. Hold on a second. There is a midrash in this small village. There was a clock in the middle of the town, and it was quite high up. And the people, when they walked, they looked at the clock, and the people were not happy, so they removed the clock and they brought it down to eye level. And everybody who walked by changed the clock to their liking, and the clock broke. And so, you know, that's the same thing. If the Torah says that how you call it, this is the time we're supposed to put tefillin on till 12 o'clock during the day, you cannot put on, or you should not put on tefillin at 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Or when you
And it was a reason for that. And every law in the Torah, there is a reason what God created.
Erwin, you said Torah, and then you quoted from the rabbinic Talmud. They're both not one is.
So what traditional Jews would say is God's law is a combination of written law, Torah and Bible, and oral law, which gets written, which is Talmud. So, for example, in the Torah, it says 3 times, somebody knocks out your eye, you knock out their eye. In the Talmud, the rabbis prove that God couldn't have meant that, so they don't follow that, Erwin. So what you're saying is true, but it encompasses not only Torah, but all, unless you use the term Torah very broadly.
You know, one day I went to bar mitzvah in the afternoon, and after an afternoon service, the rabbi said that let's go to the courtyard and we're gonna do a Havdalah service. So I asked him, I said, I don't think it's Havdalah because the sun is still up.
Right.
It's still, and he says, well, the family requested because it's a beautiful service.
Right.
And I said, well, you know, it's you're sure your boss. And, you know, it was very,
different
very
movements have different.
surprising to me.
Well, it shouldn't surprise you, Erwin. The essence of Reform Judaism is that ethical laws are not up for negotiation, but ritual laws are up for negotiation. And if you don't like that, God bless you, but you're outside of Reform Judaism.
There's a place.
No, I am a Reform Jew, but I'm
Yeah.
practicing Judaism.
Yes, no, I know, and I'm a Reform Jew and I practice Judaism. But that means that sometimes I will participate in a Havdalah service that is too early to light Havdalah candles. And there are times when I turn on a computer on Saturday mornings, and so do you. Even though in
Yes,
traditional
yes.
Judaism we shouldn't do that. So the rituals, I think, are negotiable and a matter of between me and God. And I play off different different benefits or different goods. You know, I go and I drive and I teach people on Saturdays. And for me, the power of teaching and the ethics of teaching, particularly non-Jews, on a Saturday morning is more important than strict observance of Sabbath laws. That's
I,
that
you
identifies
know,
me as a Reformed Jew. If I were, you know, in our community, there's a lot of education programs for Catholics on Saturday morning, and until I came along, they never had a Jewish presence. So those groups never were exposed to any teachings about Judaism. And then I came along and I said, you know, it's more important that they learn about Judaism than I make my car work so hard on Shabbat.
Could have somebody.
you know, maybe I have to refrain that I'm learning. I make all the effort to be an educated Jew.
Yep, I would say that is true. Okay, any other thoughts, comments, alternative sermons, and types of protest?
You have a non-Jew drive you?
No, the answer is no. Because the commandment says,
Yeah,
nobody
I know
works,
that,
not
but-
you, your maidservant, your manservant.
but you're not following the commandment anyway. Once that's established that you're going to be going somewhere by car, couldn't you have a non-Jew drive so that you're at least not personally operating the car?
Yeah, but that's a distinction without a difference.
Okay.
So I would say under Jewish law, you are just as liable. You have broken the laws of the Sabbath by having a non-Jew, just by taking, you know, my briefcase outside of 4 cubits outside my house. I've broken the Sabbath. So I'm not in that world, and I don't let it bother me, actually. I'm interested in that world and I study that world, but I recognize that I'm outside of it.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
I step outside of it during the Shabbat, during Sabbath, you know, I just ask Hashem for forgiveness, and I always get it. If I do something that you wouldn't ordinarily do, I'm good with that.
Yeah, so the interesting question is, I don't ask for forgiveness because I don't believe the things I'm doing are wrong.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
And I know, Christina, you're going to promise not to eat that beautiful animal you have in front of you, right? Or let him near any one of these horrible people that are massing over our borders and just looking for
But I just want to say, so that's the beauty of Reform Judaism, is the flexibility. You don't have to worry whether you believe something or not. It's okay, right?
Yeah, I would say that is a thing that Reform Jews should be proud of and ashamed of. And I love Yitz Greenberg's comment that I don't care what movement you're a part of, as long as you're ashamed of it. So I would say the fact that we don't have a disciplined understanding of what sin is, and a disciplined dedication to observance is one of the things that is a weakness of Reform Judaism. I can live with that, but I don't pretend that it's perfectly okay. I admire people who are more dedicated to observance of Jewish observance than we Reform Jews are. Yeah, Alan?
Well, I would approach it, word it a little differently. I see the approach of the Reform movement in the last 30 years, as opposed to the first 100, is focusing on being more informed and make conscious decisions that have meaning to you.
Yes.
And so there's no opportunity in that way I say it, that the word shame would come up, because when I choose by understanding why I would wear tefillin and why I choose not to. It's how my Jewish practice makes sense to me, and maybe I'll do it at some time in the future because that's
Right.
a subject I've thought about. But unless I don't do it, it doesn't relate to this
Right.
idea that
And
it,
I would say the number of Reform Jews that really study traditional Judaism and make informed decisions about their practice is vanishingly small.
oh, of course, but that's what you do in this generation, not my childhood rabbis, but you do, and today's rabbis work really hard to make people appreciate and engage in Reform Judaism the way you teach us, and the rest of those people just have been not paying attention or choose not to pay attention.
I mentioned that I would like to be a learner Jew, but also that gives me the opportunity to be a good person, and that's very important to me.
Yes, I agree with you. Okay, on that note,
Buenas noches.
good friends, buenas noches, Laila Tov,
Lila
Bye.
Tov.
Lila Tov.
and we'll see you next time. So next time we will actually, well, we'll take up the last statement in the series. So take care, stay well.
All right. Thank you.